Hello and welcome everyone to the 18th episode of Across the Decades. I'm joined by my Viking friend, Avary.
Oh.
I think a great place to start, as always,
Yeah.
as is custom with the show, is, if you wouldn't mind, flipping over the hourglass. That's going to be our reference point. That's where we get the logo for Across the Decades.
And
there we go.
begin.
And then also a quick cheers.
Oh, yeah.
So we're drinking a half-frozen Topo Chico because it's one of the colder days, in the winter. So cheers.
Cheers.
Not like a little snow.
Mm-hmm.
You probably like that as a Viking. So.
I do. Ancestry is used to that.
So, of course, I think that's probably a good place to start as a segue. How did that come up, and then how did you end up meeting? Like, how did you and I end up meeting through that?
So this all started study abroad in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackie and I happened to be selected as random roommates for each other. And so, which ultimately was one of the best things that has ever happened to me. But so began this Viking discussion was we were talking about tattoos that we had or things like that as we were getting to know each other. And when I was 18, it was my first tattoo that I got, and I went by myself, all this kind of stuff. I looked online, and I found this Viking ruin symbol, and it meant passion, heart, strength, and mind.
Oh.
And I loved it, but so that's what I got. But when I guess I maybe hadn't told many people about it. Or
Did Jackie ask?
Jackie asked. She was like, "Oh, what does it mean?" And then I think one thing led to another, and she either asked, "Oh, so do you have like Norwegian heritage? Are you a Viking?" She either asked that, or I might have offered it because I felt like I can't just have this Norwegian
this tattoo.
And I did it, and I swear it just kind of came out. And then I just kind of sat with it. And then years later, I forgot about it. Because I was like, well, maybe I am. Who knows?
Who knows?
You know? Wouldn't be far off. And then years later, maybe it wasn't years, it was maybe a year or two later, I had completely forgotten that whole conversation. And Jackie came to visit me in Lincoln. And we went to dinner with my family. And Jackie was like, "So you're all Norwegian? Like you're all descendants of the Vikings?" And my family were like, "What?
Who told you that?
How did you?" And then she's like, "Avary," and they're like, "Avary, you told her that we're Vikings?"
That's so
and it
funny.
just turned into a whole thing. My family lost it. Jackie was like, "You're kidding. You were this whole time."
It's easy to forget that you're not a Viking.
It wasn't my. I feel connected to the Viking spirit.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, I'm not. I'm not.
You're more. Would you be like, I'm more Greek now?
More Greek.
There you go.
No, I can't claim anything that I'm actually not. But
You're Nebraskan through and through.
I'm Nebraskan through and through.
So,
Husker, go big red.
There you
Corn
go.
Huskers.
Look at that.
Bleed Husker red.
The European mind cannot comprehend.
No.
They cannot comprehend.
Vikings hold nothing on the Corn Huskers.
They cannot comprehend the flyover state mentality. Yeah, right.
We try so hard to feel connected to something, you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
But so that was, of course, the time that you spent that was a story that came from the time you spent in Greece with Jackie. So I guess, how did you choose Greece? And then what was your experience actually being in Greece and living, how many months you were there? Like half a year almost, right?
Yeah. It was, so I went to American University in DC, and one of the things I was most excited about was the study abroad opportunity. Both of my older brothers studied abroad. They went to school and just, had their own amazing experiences that they took from it. So I was thrilled. And I originally, when I went to AU, one of the first things that I did was look at the study abroad options and the locations. And I saw Greece, Thessaloniki, and something stood out to me. I don't know what it was, instinct or something. And I was like, that's it. That's where I'm going. And so when the time came, like I had remembered this and was so excited, like I had made that decision my freshman year, and I didn't go till junior year. But when it came time and to select, my parents were like, well, don't you want to look anywhere else? What about, Spain or all these other amazing places? And I was like, no, it's Greece. It's
calling you.
I'm going to go. Yeah, it's calling me. So, and it turned out to be, I think, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And that's where I met Jackie. We were randomly selected as roommates, and some other really incredible people there. And then you.
Yeah, through that, yeah.
And through Jackie, and it kind of, all of that changed my life. And so, yeah, it just was it was an incredible experience. And I had the best time getting to know Jackie and learning more about myself. And then we met in, was it Crete? Or was it?
No, it was Croatia.
Croatia.
Yep.
Excuse me. Thank you.
In Zagreb.
Yeah, Zagreb.
On a day not too unlike this. Yeah.
It was cold. It was cold, but it was beautiful. And I think there were a couple other people there, and you had been doing some backpacking. And yeah, it was just an amazing time, and kind of the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was, of course, a number of people, Josette, who's actually here with us now, and then not to mention Despina, and then through that Christos, and then all of the doors that opened in terms of having the opportunity to go back and actually attend their wedding and be part of that celebration. What an incredible journey from meeting her.
It was.
And then being invited and actually having them be at the wedding, but then also they came here, and there's so much that I think life throws at you that you're like, it's just crazy how the worlds collide.
It is. And I remember, so I studied abroad, right, in Greece. It was a semester. And then I traveled by myself, island hopping, for about 2 months after that.
With your family?
No.
Oh, that was just by yourself.
That was just by myself. They came for about 2 weeks at the end.
Okay.
And we did some more just around Greece. But for those weeks after study abroad too, those were incredible. I learned a lot about myself in ways that I wasn't anticipating or expecting. And I also got to spend a lot of quality time with Despina and her family.
Shout out to Bobby's.
Yes. And it was so incredible. And I learned a lot about, I think it was an incredibly transformational point in my life too, is just kind of realizing things about myself that I didn't know before. So in terms of me being able to lead myself, I grew up with 2 older brothers who are incredibly brilliant, capable people. And I just kind of followed their lead. Wherever they went, I knew I would get to wherever we were going. I just knew that, so I just sat back and let them take the lead.
And there's an age gap too, right? So that makes it a little bit more natural.
Yep, there's an age gap. We're about 4 years in between each. So 8 years from my oldest brother and myself. So I naturally kind of fell into this following position in a way, but it was just safe and natural. And so I was nervous going into Greece, was like, what if I mess up? What if something goes wrong? Or what if I can't find my way? And I just, my parents were incredibly like, you know what you need to do. You can do it. So, but I didn't know that until I really was in the position where I problem solved and just kind of took things in stride as they came and
became fluent in Greek.
All right. No, not quite. But it was a pretty amazing time.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. I mean, that's one of the things that you can't properly grasp or understand, or maybe that's not the right word, but like come to reckon with until you're actually in that situation or circumstance.
Absolutely.
And the way that you went into it also, set you up for success, because you did have, people from the States, obviously Jackie and others, that gave you that community, but also you were in a part of Europe that is less traveled, right? It's not the Spains, it's not the Italies, right?
No.
The Englands. And you did encounter that culture.
Yeah.
And it's obviously different, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like, even if you go to Germany, a lot of people, if they find out you're American, they'll just speak English to you, right?
Right. Absolutely.
That's not the case in Greece.
Yeah.
So using that as a segue, actually, how is it that you met Despina? Like, what was that encounter like?
Yeah, we met her on our first day, I think, in Thessaloniki. Jackie and I and a couple other individuals and friends that we made, we all decided to, on one of our first days, go out and walk the city and tour around. And so we walked from, our little apartments to the downtown area. And got lost, obviously, because we had never been there, and we're just trying to follow this map, and it's all in Greek, and
literally.
Yeah. And so we got lost, and so we found this small little coffee shop. They were like, okay, maybe we just like go, refigure things out and try and get someone to help us figure out where we're going. And she was actually working at that coffee shop that day, and was in the back, working in the kitchen, and was not a server that day. We come in, we don't speak Greek, the servers don't speak English, but Despina did. And so she went back, this server that we were trying to communicate with, went back into the kitchen, told her to come out and try and communicate with us. And she did. She was incredible and giving us great ideas. And then we're like, well, let's meet up.
Yeah, let's hang out.
If you're here, let's go out sometime, or let's get diddly, and that's what we did. And she was along for the ride the rest of the time with us. And that's
amazing.
And teaching us and showing us and including us in her life and in with her friends. And it was so special. It just made the whole entire experience even more incredible, because we were able to connect with a local and see that side of her side of Greece. And
that's a great point.
And I think that was really special for me. We weren't just doing the touristy things. We weren't.
Right.
She was exposing us to the real side, the everyday side, and I loved that.
And her exposing you to the Greek side also meant you were able to expose her to the American side.
Absolutely, we did.
And you did that actually with a party for her birthday, right? So tell us about that.
Yes, we threw her a good old-fashioned American birthday party, and invited some of her great friends, and we got a cake and went out, and it was just so much fun, because she was so interested. She had already taken all these English classes, but was very interested and had a connection to Australia with her boyfriend and his family, and now husband.
Right. Shout out Christos.
Shout out Christos. And so, but it was just an exciting, collision of cultures and lives, and again, we had a total blast.
Yeah, again, that they have no idea that they're missing out on beer pong, and
I think we did do some beer pong. I mean, we did the classic stuff, because we got all of our study abroad friends to come with us and show her a good time, and play some of those
that's American culture,
games
baby,
that are just a rite of passage.
Yeah.
So it was fun. It was a total blast. And, for the longest time, looking back on pictures, I always had this, I loved them, but I almost couldn't look at the pictures, because it was such a happy time with such amazing people. And so talking about this is really nice. We do a lot of reminiscing when I'm around with Jackie and stuff, but it just was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I think.
Oh, for sure. And it flowered into something, like we mentioned, right?
Yes.
They're now in Australia, and they're equally as far from us as they were in Greece.
That's right.
But I think it's, to your point, like an incredible opportunity of actual culture sharing, right? Because I think for much of the tourist culture, it's easy to go with the mentality of consumption, meaning there's this culture on display and I'm just going to kind of consume it, right? It's kind of an extension of like the American consumerism, right? You just go to these countries and you're like, I'm going to consume this culture and then leave.
Right.
But what you did, as well as Jackie, Josette, and everyone else in the program, was like integrate yourself and really not only, experience it, but also give what is unique to you and culturally, right? From, of course, from the Midwest, from the East Coast, there were people from, I think, primarily those two regions, right?
Yeah.
But actually getting to show them what you're about, right? And those Nebraska roots, which is where I think, your life is in Nebraska. You grew up there. You live there now, of course. Like your family is, I would say, a big deal there.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but.
So, yeah, what was that like, growing up in the Midwest, in Lincoln, and then tying that into, obviously the campaigning aspect and being, one of those families that I would imagine people in the community actually look to.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was an interesting experience growing up in kind of in a smaller city, Lincoln. It's got a lot going on. It's a great place to be, but definitely smaller, and having a political figure as a mom. I think she started running for her campaign for the legislature when I was in high school, maybe a little before, and it was an incredible experience to see her in that light. And she was the first person that I ever voted for, was my mom.
Oh,
which
that's
is kind
beautiful.
of a cool, really, really special opportunity that I had. And she worked so hard and was tireless and passionate. And I will always treasure that time that I got to see her in action. She had always been active in the community while my brothers and I were growing up. So that's something that she always held close to her heart, is being doing her part.
Contributing, giving back, and wanting to affect change, right, in a positive way.
Absolutely. And, so I always knew that was her character, and we grew up going to different events, and she did a lot of fundraising for the community. And then politics came, and that kind of was a shift. And we were a little bit more under kind of a spotlight.
Right.
And that was, I think I had kind of been used to that. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but growing up with my two brothers, who are just these achieving, brilliant, capable people, I was always that little sister, right? Taylor and Graham's little sister. And I loved being that, but I think there was always a spotlight too, because they were so high achieving. That was the path. That was the expectation. That was what I felt I needed to match.
Did you feel like it was a positive peer pressure?
I do. It was, I think it was very positive. I also think I placed more expectations upon myself than anyone else did. Even though I thought that's, like, looking back at it now, people expected highly of me just because...
As a natural extension of...
Exactly. But I also took it on a little bit more than I think anyone would have expected me to. Sure. Not in that way, but just the pressure. So when my mom ran for the campaign and she became more of a spotlight and a spokesperson and was here and there and everywhere, I was already kind of used to the feeling of keeping a high standard and a high bar for myself. So, and I also my parents grew up teaching me to hold my values, and be strong in my beliefs. And, so, I always just felt a sense more of pride than of, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? How do I approach this if people don't agree with me? So in high school, I think I think it would have been more challenging had they not already taught me how to
Mm-hmm.
stick to my guns kind of thing.
And you were a little bit older, as you mentioned.
I was.
You were in high school.
That was really helpful. So there were times it was a little bit challenging just because you kind of go everywhere and everyone either knows you or your mom and again, it's a small town, so word spreads and everything is visible. So that part was could be challenging at times, just with high schoolers too, and that sort of thing. But she was a powerhouse, and she won her first election and then was reelected after that, and just did so much for the community and for people, and did it with a whole heart. And so that was really cool to see. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And also to your point about like having that spotlight, that's like a natural expectation that I think any polity is going to look to for anyone they vote for. I mean, right? That's why the family of the people they vote for matters, only to the extent of like, okay, well, this shows how like their ideas or their beliefs or their values is affected into the family that they have, right? It's hard for someone to say that they're like pro-family if they don't have a family or if they're divorced, right?
It's harder for people to feel like they can relate or absolutely.
And I think there is something also too about the Midwest culture that I think can be not necessarily denigrated, but kind of looked upon as like lesser than, because you have people in like New York City or LA and these big cosmopolitan cultures, right? But I think what you saw with COVID was, there's a reason a lot of these people, when they reassessed everything, they did go to places like, I don't know, like Idaho, which isn't the Midwest, but, a little bit more of that, not necessarily metropolitan, but also, places more rural, including like Nebraska or Iowa or so many of the other states that I think have just a calmer or like more in tune with reality of like what their life is about. And I think, having that, what would be your idea as to what kind of drove your mom to make that step? Because was she already in a career related to politics even when you were younger, and then it was just like the right time? Or was there something that you think kind of drove that change as you were getting older that then resulted in that decision?
That's a good question. So we have a long history of our family being in Nebraska. I think my grandparents lived here. I believe my great-grandparents lived here as well. So, our sense of community in Nebraska is really strong. And has always been very strong for my mom and my dad. And so, when she started off, she's a lawyer. She and my dad created a law firm together.
Oh, great.
And so when she started having kids, she went to a more part-time position at the law firm for a while, and then she just started focusing a little more on volunteering and being connected that way in the community. And
still very high impact, but in a different light. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And she had examples from her mom and her grandmother as well, and her dad, because they were also very involved in the community. And my grandfather was mayor for a short period of time.
Oh, wow.
And so there is kind of a
legacy or like a dynasty almost.
just examples,
for sure.
And so she that's kind of how she grew up, with those values. And then I think because she was so successful with what she was doing in the community and fundraising for different projects and programs and parks and all this kind of stuff to better improve, she saw that she could have an impact. And again, she's fierce. She doesn't back down, and I think those are really great qualities to have in a politician, and someone who wants to affect change. And so she decided that she wanted to go a little bit bigger scale, and not bigger scale, just cast a wider net. And so she decided to go into politics. I think that was kind of the impetus, was she saw the impact that she was having and saw that it was doing good for the community that she loved and for the children that she was raising. And just wanted to keep going and kind of double down on what she could do. Yeah.
And seeing those examples, I mean, beyond just your mom, like, do you think that, I mean, I'm sure it did influence, but to what extent do you think that maybe shaped the career paths or decisions or visions that you had about where you would go moving forward?
I think it had a huge impact. I think I've always just wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself, and have always just desired to, honestly, what I've always wanted is to be an advocate. And I saw advocate in a few different ways. So I originally I was very obviously politically involved in my family life. And then that kind of translated internally that, that's kind of the direction that I want to take for an advocate. Like, that's what I viewed an advocate, and even a lawyer, as my parents were lawyers. Like, that's what advocacy looked like to me. So that was the trajectory that I began initially to take. So I went to school in DC and majored in political science. It was communications, law, economics, and government. Very similar to political science. Worked in Congress on the Hill for multiple years as an intern. I worked in a communications role too, and a diversity and equity inclusion organization, kind of smaller organization. So I don't know. I thought politics, law school, that sort of thing was what I wanted to do. Watching my mom go through these 8 years of politics and being a representative, a senator actually in Nebraska, because we are a bicameral or unicameral legislature. Anyways. So watching her go through that experience was pretty eye-opening, because it takes a certain, I think, personality to be able to really be good at
gumption.
That. Yes. Yeah. And gosh, when I tell you, every single night, she and my dad both, I mean, they were a team. They were at every event, every show, every fundraiser, every single night they were doing something. And then the rest of their days was just working with my mom's team on creating legislation and battling against people who didn't have quite as open mind or open heart as she did. And so it was it was a lot. It was a lot.
A lot of moving pieces. And so I imagine, there's a strategy, there's the actual logistics of boots on the ground.
Right. And then there's that trying to find common ground and negotiate with the rest of her
constituency.
Yes. Yeah. And the legislators
or opposition,
themselves.
Right,
the senators themselves who it's like a dance. It is.
Oh, that's a great way. Yeah.
And trying to find balance and harmony, and while also staying strong in your beliefs again, and fighting for what you believe in, while maintaining that respect and that professionalism.
Like a sort of posturing, but not in a negative sense, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, this is what we're about, and obviously that it never comes to any blows or anything like that, or anything, any sort of violence, but it's a sort of there's a real integrity and character and strength here.
Yeah.
And demonstrating that, of course, through intellect, discourse, conversation, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it was, gosh, it was so amazing how she handled it. It really was. I've never seen anything like it. But I realized, holy cow, I don't know if I've got that. I don't know if that's the role I want to play. If she handled it so perfectly all the time. It was wild. So this is all to say, I my dad's a lawyer too, but he was doing his working at his firm full time. And those were those two avenues that I saw. And I began to see as I was growing and as I started more heavily considering my career, my future, I was trying to figure out how that looked. And I started to come to realize that there are so many more ways to be an advocate than just these two avenues
absolutely.
that I saw.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I am today is continuing down that road of what does that advocate look like for me?
Yeah, figuring out, and this is actually, so 2 points. One, I like how you started it about saying how you've always felt this calling of working for something bigger than yourself or being a part of something bigger than yourself. There's this great, I think he's a psychologist. I can't remember quite what he is, but John Vervaeke talks about, for a lot of people, the way that they can know if their life is in alignment or fulfillment and finding purpose, meaning, is what is that thing that you want to exist even after you die, and how much of your daily action is oriented toward that, right? So if it's a particular institution, a particular cause, or maybe more in the abstract, whether it's, love or justice or truth, how much of what you're doing day to day enforce or like supports that, upholds that, right? And that's how you can kind of align what it is that you're doing with that like long-term kind of North Star, where maybe the path isn't clearly illuminated, but it's in that direction at least, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can be scary to take the tangible next steps.
Yeah.
But if you have the North Star, then at least you're like, okay, I know it's in that direction.
Right.
It's not this way. It's not that way, right?
Yes.
And then also advocacy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's, that calling within you, which is also the same root word, I think. Advocacy, meaning, I would imagine, comes from the Latin word for vox, which is to speak, advocar, to speak for, like a sort of, speaking for someone, representing them.
Yeah.
And then vocation, which also, it comes from speak, of like what you're called to, right?
Yeah.
And having that be something that what your mission here is, depending on your particular, maybe like a charism is what the definition for, incorporating maybe a mission or purpose that a lot of people can share, but the charism is what gives you your unique, right? That's where you get like charisma, right? It's
like that.
Imbued in your personality, not as a deficiency, but as a strength. Right? Because there's something unique about you that's different than your mom, than your dad, than your siblings, right? Even though you're so close to them, obviously coming from the same parents.
Right.
There is something that's unique about you where you can still have that calling while saying, I actually have unique strengths that can help in different ways, right? So all that to say, like, now that you're at a point, or once you got to the point where maybe you, reflected and said, okay, like, I like maybe the mission or the ideal, but from a practical standpoint, maybe this isn't the path forward. Where are you now in terms of like how you're moving forward in terms of making that advocacy pursuit, right?
I really like that. I like the you have your North Star, even if the path isn't illuminated. I think that's exactly how I feel in my current state. Is I see this star. I see the woman that I want to be. The type of life I'd like to lead, and the foundation for that. And I see that's kind of my North Star. And I know that includes advocacy and being a part, as I said before, of something bigger than myself. That's there. And so I'm trying to stay on course and follow that. And that path is not illuminated for me right now. I don't know, that question that you always get in interviews, what's your 5-year plan? What does your life look like in 5 years? I always struggle with that, in a sense, answering that, because I think, and I've struggled a lot with this question and with this idea is, why isn't this path illuminated? Why can't I pinpoint in 5 years what exactly I want to be doing? And that has always been a huge
difficult
struggle.
question. And I think there is a sort of overconfidence. I won't say arrogance, but I think there is an overconfidence from people who say that they have this 5-year plan, Because I think if you look at the like metrics or like the data of people that outline a 5-year plan and how many of them actually complete it, I think it's got to be like less than 1%. And so I think to your point of how is it that you can have something that's in the distance that's shining and calling you and inviting you, and yet you have no light.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where like the virtues of like hope or faith come in, right? Because the line that's used is like faith is like a lamp unto my feet. The word lamp is actually important there because it's not a flashlight, right? With a flashlight, you can penetrate darkness in the distance in a very narrow scope, kind of like what a lot of people ask when they ask about the 5-year plan, right? Like shine on in the like it's so far, but you don't get the scope of everything else that could affect that, right? Like you could highlight something in the distance, and yet you might not know what's actually like, you know, 1 foot to your right.
Absolutely.
And so that changes everything, right? You're constantly like kind of haphazardly pointing the flashlight in different directions.
Yes.
But
only shines so far.
Right, but a lamp is something that surrounds your entire being. And so the lamp may not show 4, 5, 6 steps ahead.
Yeah.
But it does show 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Right? And so the lamp that you have at your feet does encompass where you are in the present. And as long as you trust that those next 4, 5, 6 steps are going to be in your favor, then you can take those steps.
Yeah.
And it does take a sort of faith, right?
Yeah,
That's why the analogy of a lamp is so powerful.
I love that. I haven't thought about it that way. I've thought about it like a flashlight, but I didn't think of it like a lamp surrounding you. And I think that's a great point, and it is where hope and faith come in. And especially for me, is you know, I'm when I pray, when I get frustrated, that I can't quite figure out what I want to do, what that looks like. I can't grab hold of it. I just, that's where my faith comes in, that I will be guided on the right path of love. Because for me, that's what's going to get me to that North Star, is that I am leading a life of love. And that direction is what's getting me there.
Yeah.
And so I have to just constantly remind myself, but that is also that you're surrounded by this light.
The light, and you can understand things within your very small perspective, right?
Yes.
That there are things that are greater than you, right?
Yes.
Because if you're working for something greater than you, then that means that there are things that you don't necessarily comprehend and also can't, right? Like by nature, you know, you're one person, you know, you can't do everything. You can't know what people's minds are. You can't, but what you can do is, you know, ask for what's within your realm to be highlighted, and then how do you respond, right?
How do you respond?
Because it does take the step, right? There could be all the light in the world, but if you never actually step forward, you're never getting closer to.
And that can be a scary part too, is listening to what may be calling you, and then acting on that.
Oh yeah.
That sometimes makes me nervous. Is am I listening? Am I really listening? Am I taking in the signs, and am I acting in favor of that? And that's what I live constantly trying to make those right decisions, but also giving myself grace that if I miss something or take a wrong step, that I'll get back on track.
Right. Yeah, and I think you have to be, right? Because again, because you don't have a perfect picture. Yeah. You don't know, like there could be dips, valleys, mountains, you know, thorns, right?
The terrain, you can't know what the terrain is.
But is it better to continue towards the North Star or give up the North Star completely, right? And take the easy path, the road less traveled, right? Yeah, there's something about G.K. Chesterton, this prolific writer from England, wrote that an inconvenience is an adventure wrongly considered. Or the other way around is an adventure is an inconvenience rightly considered. That the perception upon which we gaze inconveniences in could actually be the opportunity for adventure. That's where that's where adventure lies, right? Like the perfect tie-in with Despina, right?
Yes.
That you were inconvenienced, quote unquote, by not knowing where you were going and a coffee shop, and you could have looked at it as like, oh man, we're ruining our first day. We're already off to a terrible start. Right. or,
Yeah.
the world of possibilities is open for you to step into and saying like,
Embrace.
how can we make this actually an adventure?
Yeah.
And then how do you turn your entire life into that?
Right.
Right. Converting every possible opportunity as one of growth. And that's where you start to see, things start to come together, but you do need that grounding.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people also conflate difficulty and doubt. You can have 10,000 difficulties, but they never amount to a single doubt. As something John Henry Newman says. And a perfect example of that is like, maybe I don't know the answer to Calc 3, right? And I have a ton of difficulties in math or science or whatever else. But that's not me doubting the fact that calculus can answer, real questions, right? Or that just because I don't know something about law or physics or, arithmetic, those difficulties don't actually make me question whether 2 + 2 = 4, right? Because I'm so grounded in something that I know that just because I can't comprehend doesn't negate the fact that it's true.
That's true.
And so once you have that North Star and you're like, I know this is it.
Yeah.
Love, truth, justice, goodness, beauty.
Yeah.
The way that I get there can be riddled with difficulties.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out, it's like, well, what if me wanting courage isn't going to be given to me in the way that I think? Meaning, what if what's given to me actually are opportunities to be courageous?
Yes.
Right?
I just read a book. My mom got me this book that I love, and it said, okay, well, what if we're not, you're not missing, it's something, please, you don't ask for more strength or more courage. You ask for opportunities to be courageous, just as you said. And that sticks with me. So that's how I lead, is this is another opportunity to lead,
grow.
to practice, to grow, to better myself. Yeah. Yes.
Like sometimes, if you think of like plant growth, obviously requires sun, but also requires water, and that can be rainy days, right? Like, how do you navigate that where you do need opportunities to actually test your metal, right?
Yeah.
Gold is refined in the fire.
Right.
And so we have to go through the fire and then see what we're made of, right?
Yeah.
Character is that which you're left with when you're bankrupt, is another way of thinking about it, right? Like when you have nothing left in material possessions or anything like that, what do you actually still own, right? And that's your actual character.
Yeah.
So.
And my dad always tells me, it's easy. It's very easy to make things more difficult. It's very hard to make things better, in a sense, right? Like sometimes that easy way, or it's a lot easier to just say, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Or, oh, I'm not going to do this, or, oh, I don't really feel like solving that, so I'm just going to let it go, right? And there can be benefit, but actually saying, you know what, I'm going to work on this relationship,
Exactly.
even if it's harder. That sort of thing is, what are you willing to sacrifice to be good and do good?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to grow in patience, well, are you spending time listening to someone who irritates you at work? Right.
Instead of dismissing, which is so easy to just dismiss.
If you want to grow in love, well, what do you think of the beggar on the street, right? Do you see them as being equal to you, right? That could be you, right? Like those are, that's the framing.
Yeah.
And I think, for obviously the world that we live in, it's easy to kind of just skip over that and be in the quotidian or the day-to-day, right? The routine and like, I need to do this, I need to do that. Like tax season is upon, right? Like there's so much, obviously. But how do we keep the humane component, alive, and that we don't fall into this, that we're not AI robots, right? That we're not just glorified machines that just process things, because then you get into a situation where you lose the soul, right?
Right.
And what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? But I think this ties into something that we were talking about a little bit last night, but this is actually a question from the previous guest, which is something that I like to do, where you'll eventually ask the question for the next guest.
Yeah.
And this is, when's the last time you changed your mind about something? And I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. The context that I would imagine is something that changed, like something substantial, right? Like not, I like celery now, or my favorite color changed from, red to blue or whatever.
Right. That's a great That's a great question. When's the last time I changed my mind about something? Oof, 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 oof. That's a great question. And I'm trying to think.
Or maybe what's something that you're wrestling with or is challenging you now, right? If you're undergoing that process.
I think what initially just pops up in my head is my spirituality. I've been I don't know. I've been experiencing moments and tapping more into kind of that divine, and exploring that a lot more and trying to listen. My mom is religious, and I grew up in church. Didn't connect with it then when I was younger. And I think more and more in the world I live in now, with that North Star, I'm trying to rationalize things. I'm trying to grab hold of things. I'm trying to find a tether for myself, and in order to be the woman that I want to be, and give as much as I'm wanting to give back, and hopefully leave this world more or better, or at least know that I have given and did what I could.
You lived a good life, right?
Yeah.
You fought the right battle.
Yeah.
That you're not leaving things unsettled, and you're like, I wish I had done that, or wish I did,
yeah, exactly. And that I'm giving the love that I'm capable of giving.
Yeah.
And that I want to give. Because again, that's that guiding force for me. So I've been looking a lot more into that spirituality, and into how to find that, how to be connected to it, how to rationalize values that I hold dear with religion. And that has been, I've been finding moments of realization through that process that I think ultimately are changing perspectives of mine. So I love that question. And I'm going to think about it after this podcast too, because I know that there have been moments where I've been, that's a different perspective that I just had there. And I think it's a great thing to continually ask yourself too.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think it's important to evolve as a human.
What do you think drove that initial openness, let's say? Like, what do you think led you from being in a state where you would say, like, I was more distant, or that wasn't something that I really considered, to now being in a position where you are, opening yourself up? And maybe that comes with vulnerability, or maybe also feeling silly, right? Because I think that's part of what I went through was, okay, well, if this is real, right, like, I need to start changing things. And, like, if it's not real, that's going to look kind of silly. And, like, am I comfortable with trying things out and maybe being wrong about it? Like, but you kind of have to, again, you have to take those steps, right?
Right. I think there has been a lot going on in my family health-wise lately, both internal and external. And life is happening so quickly. And I'm realizing how fragile everything is. And I think for me, that is really pushing me to, again, be able to handle it, even find comfort in the uncomfortable. And so I think that's kind of what has driven it. And of course, my own trying to find my own path is hard if you're just blind to it all.
Right.
And I don't want to be blind to anything, especially when I'm trying to give so much. So I think those two things have really been on my mind a lot, and I want to find connection to those, to the uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that tethering is so important. I mean, you to use like an analogy that I'm sure is kind of evokes images of Greece, for example. When you're just a ship out at sea and the waters start to rage and, they come up and start to turn the boat over, if you're not moored, then you're just floating in space, right?
Right.
I think the analogy used is kind of like a balloon.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
just pushed every which way, right? Or you're building your house on sand.
Wherever
Like,
someone pushes you, you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways where you can relate to a deeper sense within you, right? Because you're noticing, it seems like, that there are forces at play.
Yeah.
That maybe with particular events, like especially health is one that kind of, I think, brings people to a greater realization, as tended to happen with COVID, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Where they say, okay, well, there is something that maybe there was something I was going to say, but there's something, that I'm missing about. I was just about to tie it into a quote, but I can't remember. But like the importance of that and reckoning with that and saying, okay, if this is real, then that has implications, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the also definitions of religion is a little bit more technical, but it's the habit of virtue that inclines the will to render unto God that which he deserves. Now that's really technical, but really what it means is it's a habituation of the good, right? To give to God what he deserves for being who he is, right? So if the spiritual component is real and this is an aspect that you can communicate with and they can answer you and they can lead you, right? Then what does that mean about what you're supposed to give, right? And the virtues, which I think you've outlined clearly and beautifully, of love and truth and being an advocate for, and those things end up becoming so inculcated within you that you end up being like a sort of, and we talked about this a little bit as well, a sort of mirror to let the line shine forth, right? And then giving that back to God. A perfect example is when a man gives his wife or girlfriend or even daughter, right, flowers, they don't take the flowers and then say like, oh, thank you, and shove them in the drawer, hide them. No, they take what is given to them, beautify them, give them their own touch, cut the stems, fluff the leaves, zhuzh them, arrange them, put them in a vase, fill it up with water, give it life, and then represent it to the man, right, in a way that's at the focal point in the home. So it's kind of this analogy of like, the man can give a house, but the woman is the one that makes it into a home, right? Or the man is the one that can provide like the ingredients, but there's something about grandma's cooking, right? Where they make it into a meal, home cooked meal, right? And it's kind of taking, I think, the more traditional approach of saying like the man is like the head of the household, but the woman is the heart of the home. Well, that you can't have a body without a head, so too you can't have a body without a heart, right? It's the brain receives the blood from the heart, but the way that we humans move is by the headship, right? And so once you see that complementarity, there's something so beautiful about it, where obviously with the pregnancy and Jackie and everything, like you're seeing that, I think, at full display, right?
Yes.
She's giving life, but I'm the one that's moving around, making sure that the living room right here is beautifully organized and clean, and it's not actually super disorganized like people might think behind the camera.
Spotless.
But yeah, like once you kind of fall into that approach, I think that's where you start to see real beauty and unity come forth. But yeah, I kind of digressed a little bit.
No, I agree, and I think that involves also surrounding yourself with people who can share with you in that journey.
Oh,
too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's what I try my hardest to do is surround myself too with beautiful people who I can learn from and grow with. That's
a perfect segue to actually my surprise question.
Oh yeah.
What's one tangible improvement about yourself that you're working on? Not including working out.
Yeah, not including working out. Good. Oh gosh. Let's see. Sometimes I feel like I have lots of things I'm working on, but I think there are a few. But right now I'm working on. Right now I am working on one that pops up is, and I mentioned this briefly, but how I react to certain situations. I'm known to at times have strong reactions to things. And I think I have made improvements, but it's something I'm continually working on, specifically my defensiveness. And feeling a need to prove myself or to be right, or I think I have some unresolved things and maybe insecurities that I'm projecting when I do get defensive, or when someone, specifically at work, questions what I might have said, or a decision that I've made, or a strategy that I've presented. And I'm working really hard to not take things too personally. Not everything, I don't have to be right all the time. And even if I am right and I don't get that credit, or I don't get that recognition, or someone counters it and goes a completely different way regardless, that's not on me, right? I just want to be able to let that go and be confident in myself and my own decisions and my own instincts, or, what I'm giving is, I just need to be confident in that and not be so reactive.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, that's something that I've definitely struggled with, and still do, right? I think it's a never-ending battle of recognizing, like, for myself, my own weaknesses, and it's a natural, like, I'm never going to be perfect. No one is, right?
No.
But to your point, there is a limit of, okay, I've given the truth, I've said my piece, and that, that's sufficient. That people are not their actions, right? Separating between the abilities and who people are innately. And, just because you do one thing or do another, you're not that thing, right? That you are something deeper than that. And once you make that separation, I think it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, it's not something that's personal, because though I said or did this thing and someone may have disliked it, that doesn't change the grounding that I have, because it's something more profound. St. Francis de Sales, in his book about the devout life, actually writes about, there is, to an extent, something good about reputation. That the reputation is good insofar as it enables people to actually, trust your character, right? Because obviously, the more you do good things, then you build up a sort of reputation, and people can, trust you and everything else, right?
Right.
But there comes a time when you maybe need to make a decision between prioritizing your reputation or tarnishing your reputation to do the right thing and going contrary to the grain, right? And what he says is that as a tree may lose its leaves, if the foundation is solid and full of integrity, then the reputation can grow back. But you should never sacrifice the tree. You should never cut the tree to protect the leaves, right? That just because you do or say something that might fluff some feathers or go if you know that that's what's right, doing so, obviously, with love and in truth, that's what's better. Because sometimes people idolize their own reputation to the expense of the tree that gives it the life, right? So doing that is, I think, a perfect kind of analogy, because I think it's so easy to think like, oh, well, if I've been doing so well, but if I do this thing at work, then maybe I'll lose my opportunity at a promotion or at a pay bump, or right. And that's where people end up prioritizing their own reputation or possibility for growth over doing what's right. And so, I think
Absolutely.
that's a lifelong, battle. It's a struggle that we'll always, persevere, but obviously we just ask that. We have the grace to be able to channel that. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, is there anything that you want to add on? I know we're coming up close on time. So.
Oh yeah. No, I am grateful for opportunities that allow me to make a better decision, and I'm trying to be open and aware of those every single day with every interaction. I don't always do it perfectly, as you said. I don't think I ever really fully will, but at least leading with intention and goodness is key for me. So
yeah, and I mean, recognizing that one will never be perfect is like the first step.
Yeah.
Because recognizing, okay, there's something about me that is deficient.
Right.
Then that opens up, oh, I could be wrong. Right. And then opening up that way. It's just like going back to the 5-year plan. Planning in and of itself is not bad. Planning is good.
Right.
But the plan is not what you end up idolizing, right?
Yeah.
If you're planning and trying to cover different circumstances and think about contingencies and backups, like that can be good.
Right.
Obviously to within reason. Because you're preparing yourself for what's coming. But when, something changes or something you didn't expect, it could be, death in the family or health complications or you lose your job or whatever else, right? Then you don't say, oh, I'm going to continue, like the plan, I'm trying to uphold this plan and it's falling apart. It's a continual planning process, right? You don't make an idol out of the plan and forsake everything else because, sometimes you may recognize my child is sick. I who cares about like being VP or director or CEO of this company if at the end of the day, like now my child may not have much longer to live. I need to forego that plan.
Yeah. Yep.
Go spend time in the right order.
Create a new plan.
And then create a new one, right? And be in that constant right planning.
Right.
So
yeah. And I love these conversations too. I don't think I have them in depth as often as I would like to. So I think this platform is a really great opportunity for people to listen in and learn and just communicate and get different ideas and perspectives.
Reach out, someone, if anything you resonated, reach out to you, reach out to myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a great opportunity for community to come together and great minds to come together. And
across the decades.
Across the decades.
So actually, you're going to be the first to know from all my guests where the inspiration for the name for Across the Decades came from.
Yeah, so, I would love to know.
And the reason why is because you are now the owner of a rosary.
Yes, I am.
And it actually stems from here.
Really?
So these, and I know you have one, but you may not have it on you. So I have this. No worries. So this is a rosary. This was actually one that was gifted to me by my godfather recently. It's silver from Mexico.
Wow.
And what you have here are 10 beads. So these are called decades, right? There are different decades that comes from the Latin deca, etc. And so as one goes through and praying the rosary, I thought of it like as across the decades, right? It's also a cross the decades, right?
Nice.
So the idea is going through that, And so the
how clever.
I can't say it was my idea.
It's great idea.
It came to me while I was on a silent retreat, but I think that there's a little bit more at play here than just my ideas. So that is the idea.
Oh, I just love that.
So I think maybe a good place to wrap up, since you now are the owner, is maybe we could end with a quick prayer.
I would love that. Should I go get mine?
No, okay. I think it's fine. We'll just do a quick Our Father and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
For thine
go ahead.
is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
Is now and forever. Amen. And Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Great place to end. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Unless you have any final shout outs.
Shout out everyone
for listening. Well, thank you so much again for being on, for driving all this way from Nebraska to be in the baby shower and everything else. I know we're very grateful.
I
showering us in gifts.
This your family and the two of you and your little girl. It's all a blessing. You're all a blessing to my life. And so I wouldn't miss a single moment. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to all who listen, and I hope that you enjoyed. Again, if anything here resonated, by all means, reach out. And I look forward to having you on the next episode of Across the Decades.
Can't wait.
Thank you, and ciao.